Pakistan's leading journalist. He has reported for prestigious media organizations such as NBC, CNN, and BBC, and recently worked as editor of Nikki Asia. At home, he has also worked for Pakistan's mainstream popular TV channels such as Dawn, Jio, and Dunya TV. With a deep interest in security issues, Mr. Khan has covered the war on terror for both local and foreign media organizations and has embedded with the military in the war zone in Pakistan's former tribal areas as well as in Afghanistan. Mr. Khan was nominated as an Asia Society Global Leader and Transparency International Young Journalist Fellow. He has given lectures and presentations at think tanks and university campuses, and today we are honored to have him here. So please, everyone, give a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. I really can't believe I'm here. When I was your age, I was painting houses and yanking ladders and putting up drywall out and about this very campus. This wasn't my school, but it was the school of two friends who had taken me in while I had to make some money to go back to my own school. And see, what had happened was, it was the late 90s, and Pakistan, which is my home, had just tested nuclear weapons. And that's why I just met a major here who's studying nuclear weapons. But anywho, studying is very different from testing them, as you might note. And when Pakistan tested nuclear weapons, all of a sudden, lots of things started happening. The country was slammed with sanctions, and that's fine, because perhaps that's how the international sanctions regime, which I'm sure you've talked about or touched about during this conference here, kicks in. But for people like you, for students and people like me at that time, the effects were devastating. The rupee, my local currency, got devalued, and all of a sudden, instead of having money for 4 years of college, I had money for no years of college. And so New Haven became a pit stop, and to earn a buck as well as a free education. So this is what I did. I would wake up in the morning, I would paint houses all down the 95, and then by the afternoons, I would sneak into lecture halls, either audit classes or just try to get a freebie, because I didn't want to not use this university and what it offered. And I wasn't a YALE, but in my head, I kind of was. So it's really strange for me, but at that time, YALE was a story and continues to be one, and I like stories. So all I'm going to do for the next few minutes is just tell you a few, and then we can take some questions and we can take it from there. So I went to, when I was a little younger than you are, I went to one of the oldest high schools in the world, and it's in one of the biggest, roughest cities in the world. And you might never have heard of it, but the Karachi Grammar School is one of the world's premier institutions. It's produced multiple prime ministers and presidents and Oscar winners and Emmy winners and best-selling authors and Rhodes Scholars. And yet, most of you probably haven't heard of Karachi, forget the school. But Karachi is my hometown. It's a city of around 25 million people. That's around 3 times the size of New York, which is my current residence. And Karachi is a bunch of things. It's ugly and dirty and gritty and unsafe. It's a cross, if you really ask me, this is what I tell my friends, it's a cross between Rio, because of the slums, and Moscow, because of the organized crime, and Mumbai, because of the beach and the fun culture. But in a way, back to despite the bad reputation of Karachi, the school had a great reputation. So we're going to concentrate on the school, because we're at one, we're going to one, and we clearly have ideas about the academy. So in this school where I was at, you had to be really, really good at something. Otherwise, you were an outcast. And this was the smartest, toughest kids in the world's 5th largest country. The highest Ivy League acceptance rate in South Asia. The Brits were still running it, which added to the post-colonial stress and pressure. And like I said, you had to be good at something in the school. Now, I wasn't good at much. I'd lost my dad at 10, and that had affected things at home. That had affected things at school. That had affected pretty much everything. I was struggling. I was getting kicked out of teams and crews and gangs and cliques. I wasn't making my grades. I was hanging out with the wrong lot. And obviously, I wasn't happy. And then one day, when I was a junior, I wrote a paper. It was an essay for an English class. It was so good that I got called in to be investigated for plagiarism, which is strange because I don't know how you can plagiarize an essay in like a 45 degrees Celsius outdoor exam, but that's what they couldn't believe that I'd written it. Anyways, after defending myself, I landed my first job. The teachers were so impressed that my first and perhaps most important job is that they made me, for my writing, the editor of the school yearbook. Now, it's not a big deal to be the editor of any yearbook, for that matter. Yearbooks are simple. You've got pictures, you've got some teenage angst poetry, right? You've got some memorials, you've got more pictures, you've got some really bad essays. But this wasn't just any yearbook, right? This was the oldest publication in this country. It was 50 years older than the country itself, this particular publication. So I took it very seriously. And while most people in my position would have just used it, threw it on the resume, I really dug deep. I made it political. The country was in the throes of, in the beginning of a civil-military crisis, which still continues. It was in the throes of, it was about to start testing nuclear weapons, which I just mentioned. There was a lot going on. And that's where I found my calling. I made it institutional. Instead of writing an essay about my editorial, instead of what most high school editors would write about, more facilities, better bathrooms, better uniforms for the sports teams, I actually wrote about the country and the gap between the haves of the school and the have-nots just outside the school walls. And more than anything, I mean, whatever, maybe I was trying to be a wannabe, pseudo-intellectual or whatever. I think the yearbook gave me a purpose to really redraw and rechart my life. I started getting back into school teams. I started getting back into the school's community. My school spirit whisked me into all sorts of fun things. I became the captain of the hockey team, which was unbelievable, believe it or not, and volleyball, and even that strange thing they call cricket. But I started getting serious about college, and it worked. And I got everything in order, and I ended up here in these great United States, and admitted to some of the best schools in the world, and I ended up at the University of Michigan, which is the greatest school on earth, with respect to Yale. But anyways, Ann Arbor, Michigan, population 110,000, more than half of the people there were students. Ann Arbor was charming, but this was one of the biggest schools in America. And pretty much as soon as I got there, I got lost again. Predominantly white school. This is, again, the late 90s. Average class size, 100, 110. Nobody ever, the professors didn't know you by name unless you really stood out. I was just a student ID number, 9 digits and no more. I delved into American culture, tried my hand at playing intramural football and foosball and even broomball, but I tried my hand at student government, but I was lost. I was vastly lost. Once again, I didn't fit into the Greek culture. I didn't fit in with the jocks. I didn't fit in with the geeks. I didn't fit in with the goths. I didn't fit in with the artists. And till one day I walked into the Michigan Daily, which was the college paper. And it's one of the finest college papers in the world. It's a highly award-winning institution, which effectively became my home. I made my friends at the Daily. It was fun being at the Daily, classes by day, edit meetings and debates by night. But it was campus reporting. A couple of seniors have opened up a bar. A couple of seniors have started a startup, an interview with an important senator. No more. It was still very very local. I mean, the most exciting thing which would happen is maybe I get sent to cover a concert or something. No more than that. I was reporting about a small town and a big school. That's about it. It was fun, and then it became just okay. And then it became like everything else. It became routine. And I don't know about you, but I don't like routine. So the classes started boring me. The papers started boring me. My friends didn't think I was very exciting. I became a drag because I was simply bored. And it was pretty obvious, right? I mean, here I was, poli-sci and history major, about to graduate with average grades and probably going to get some sort of consulting gig or something boring in the big city. And that's what it was looking like. That's where the road was going. And then, one day, on a Tuesday morning, in the fall term, not too far away from this city, but pretty far away from Ann Arbor, 2 towers fell. And 9/11 happened, and everything changed. And I remember, maybe most of you were very young by then, but I remember like watching the horror, like millions of others, on TV. One of the world's greatest tragedies unfold in real time. It was unbelievable to see how it developed over the few hours. Obviously, like everybody else, I was shocked, and then scared, and then I started getting really terrified, because in the first few hours of watching those images live, as a 20-something, then hearing the analysis, then hearing the mood change of all these anchors and all these journalists, and then trying to figure it all out in my head, and then calling my mom, I started realizing that something is very clear, that the terrorists were Al-Qaeda, and that Al-Qaeda was based in Afghanistan, and the country of Afghanistan was run by the Taliban, and the Taliban were controlled by the Pakistanis, and I was a Pakistani. And there was a clear connection. By that evening, it had been established, and amongst the Pakistani community on campus, there were real fears. There was no school that day. Classes were canceled, obviously. My next class was political science, 360. When I walked in, I could see that the professor had been waiting for me. I got called on after everybody was done reflecting. I got called on towards the end. He was expecting me to say something. I never raised my hand. But when I did say something, I was so terrified, I don't even remember what I said, by the way. So I don't want to bore you with those details. But all I remember was being judged by my colleagues, by my peers. And all of a sudden, from a kid who works for the college paper, I was the Pakistani who works for the college paper. So everything, my identity, was different. Obviously, America had changed, campus had changed, and now my identity mattered more than it ever had, in a way, and was being noticed in a way which I didn't like personally. So I went into a shell. But that didn't help, because a few weeks later, I became the target of the first hate crime, the first 9/11, post 9/11 hate crime on campus, when a veteran who was inebriated attacked me. The attack was covered by local media, and all of a sudden, instead of writing the news, I was the news. I was local news for a quick minute. I didn't like it, not one bit, because I had come to America to study, to learn, to maybe get a gig, and just move on from there. But after being attacked that day on campus, that's surely when I felt, and this is really interesting because all of you are from, not just from America, you're also from different countries, and I want to hear about that after we're done talking here from my end. But I realized that I would never fit in. I didn't file charges about the assault, but I chose to write about the experience. My previous strategy of going into a shell hadn't worked. And when I chose to write about the experience, I broke an old rule. Journalists shouldn't write about themselves. The reporter shouldn't become the report. But that was the moment I realized that this is what it was all about. It was about storytelling. That's the reason we are here. Now, storytelling manifests itself best in journalism for me. That's why I'm here. But we're all, in a way, we're all storytellers, right? You've heard stories about, thank you. You've heard stories about, the reason I'm assuming you're here is you've heard stories about public diplomacy and international relations and the United Nations and global affairs. I'm assuming those are your interests because this is the Yale International Relations Leadership Institute, right? Those are the stories you like. That's why you're here. And you've been listening probably in one shape or form to these stories for years. These are stories of success, of excellence, of disasters and failures and war and love. But if you take stock for a quick minute, most of those stories have been brought to you by journalists. So, sure, we don't consume journalism for everything. We start hearing and watching and learning stories as kids, but some of us go on to craft our own stories. Some of us write them, some of us paint them, some of us film them, some of us get inspired to hear a story and go enlist in the Marines and go fight a war. Some of us get inspired to cover the war. And some of us get inspired after hearing a story to protest the war. But I don't need to remind you, you're at Yale, you've got better teachers than me, but the reason you're here is probably that some story somewhere inspired you to be here. So, in a way, I contend, and this is controversial when I say it, but I say it all the time, I think all of us are journalists of sorts, okay? Now, you're going to go back home to your families and your friends, and you're going to be telling them about what happened here, and that's effectively the essence of reporting. You go somewhere, you see what happens, you come back, you report on it to the relevant audiences. That's effectively what journalism is. But we'll go back to my sob story. So my sob story is now I'm a junior, 9/11's happened, and I've been attacked on campus. I've written about it, and I'm still not finding my center. And then one of my editors, she inspires me to do a little bit more. So I decide to wrap up school earlier than expected that semester and actually go cover the war. I was that crazy. So I took my exams a little earlier than I was supposed to, and I took a flight to Karachi, and I took another flight to Quetta, and I took a taxi to Chaman, and I paid off some soldiers to smuggle me across the border. And without any insurance, no flak jacket, no formal hostile environment training, nothing, not even a visa. Just a backpack and a Nikon F100 SLR, which is the greatest camera ever made, by the way. I end up in Afghanistan. When all of Afghanistan is trying to leave, the only two people who are moving in there is the US military from the top and me going in there. And of course, a bunch of colleagues. But that's my kind of journalism. My kind of journalism is going in the opposite direction. The stories I wrote won an award that year. Whatever, I was celebrated for a quick minute on campus. That's fine, that's fun. But what did it get me? In the larger scheme, it got me clarity. I was very clear. I was 21, around your age, a little older, and I was super clear that this, what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So, journalism happened by chance to me. Chance of birth, chance of ethnicity, chance of being attacked by an angry drunk vet, but also the chance of choice. I would go on to work for some of the world's best and worst institutions. I would go on to work for some of the world's biggest and smallest news enterprises. On the way, through this journey, over the next couple of decades, I would get detained, arrested, wounded, awarded, celebrated, I guess. I would be honored by fellowships by Ivy Leagues. I've twice rejected a Yale fellowship, by the way. And be tried by kangaroo courts, which is happening these days, by the way. But I would continue to categorize it all as a choice that I made. I choose to see the world, the same world you are seeing, this world of international affairs and conflict and war and security and diplomacy, but I choose to see it as a story. And that's what makes it interesting. A story of death and destruction and peace and hope and poverty and wealth. So I can make choices and I can set the theme for tonight. I can stand there and tell you about, which was the original plan. I can stand there and tell you about how journalists are now targeted by states. That's in the news right now. Some of us, for example, are targeted by and arrested by and detained by and sentenced by Russian dictators like Evan Gershkovich of the Wall Street Journal, who was released just yesterday in a historic prisoner swap. Vladimir Putin got a hitman and some other bad guys back, and we got Evan back, and a bunch of others. But that happened yesterday. I could tell you about him, or I could tell you about how some of us get shot, like my friend Arshad Sharif, who started his career around the same time as me. We worked for the same organizations. I left around a couple of years before he did. He escaped to Kenya. I came to study at Columbia's journalism school, slightly different choices, and he was executed at close range with a double tap. They're hearing his case right now. I could tell you that some of us get abducted, like my friend Imran Riaz Khan, who was forced and drugged last year. He was abducted for around 4 months, and when he came out, he'd lost his power to speak. Couldn't talk. No physical signs of torture, but whatever they gave him, he couldn't talk. He can talk again, thank God, he's recovered since then. Or I could tell you about how some of us are getting tried for treason and terrorism and sedition, and our passports are blocked, and our properties have been seized. That would be me, by the way. I can't go visit my girls. I can't go visit my family. I'm stuck. Sure, I'm stuck in New York City, which makes it slightly better, but I'm stuck. But lots of professions are tough. If you stick around in international affairs, you're going to bump into these professions. You're going to bump into soldiers. You're going to bump into diplomats. You're going to bump into, obviously, a lot of politicians. You're going to bump into activists and terrorists and financiers. But this isn't just a tough profession. This is also one of the world's most important. Our stories, they move markets. They trigger wars. They bring peace. Our exposés affect elections and choices and judicial findings and investigations. They affect dining table conversations. Our words get tweeted and printed and publicly bashed and celebrated. Some of them go viral. They also get people killed. Our words also get us killed. But frankly, in the end, we're doing exactly what you're doing. We're just really telling stories. Like all of you. We just choose to be slightly more vocal. So you're here to study international affairs, and thus, I know it's a Saturday night, but you should know this: the global threat to journalism, because this is a global affair and an issue which must be debated, the global threat is pervasive. In America, right here, you know what journalism is threatened by: the partisan divide, MAGA versus the Dems, red versus blue, corporate culture and racial bias in the mainstream media, and disinformation, fake news, and hate in social media. You know this. But what you might not know is that in places like where I'm from, it's threatened directly by the state, by the government, by the man himself. So just in the last few days, the army of my country has actually officially declared war on journalists, especially those of us who do this, digital journalism, who go live with their thoughts on YouTube or one of the other social platforms. They're calling us digital terrorists. And they're also treating us like terrorists. They're finding us, they're surveilling us, they're targeting us, they're abducting us, they're trying us, and yes, they are killing us. In these first 6 months that we've seen, the most number of journalists since 1992 have died in my country, just this last year. Pakistan is not special. A lot of this is happening in a lot of places, but yet, we get up every day and we do our thing. Now, I'm not here to recruit you into journalism. This is definitely not a job fair. But I can tell you that wherever you end up, after this, after YALE, after wherever, in government and diplomacy, in the arts or sciences, at the UN, in the military, you will consume our work. You will share our stories. You will remain informed and aware because of what we do. You will depend on us every day in your private and your public lives. But will you support our freedom? Because our freedom guarantees, and this is really important, our freedom guarantees your awareness. And your awareness drives your next moves. So, good luck in your next ventures, good luck in college, and good luck after that. But remember that there's only one profession in the world, and this is unchallengeable. There's only one profession in the world where its purveyors get up every morning with a single idea, with a single goal, with a single one-point agenda. How do we keep everyone more honest, more informed, and more aware? Think about that. And support your local newspapers, support your local media outlets, and especially, please, especially support independent journalism and independent journalists. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and thank you so much for sharing the value of storytelling. And for I loved how you talked about how journalism provide you an opportunity for chance. We have students who come from 20 plus countries from around the world, And they also come with their own stories to this table. They bring their own stories, and as they leave this program, they'll continue to expand on to their own stories and continue to make their own chances. So we're going to now pass it off to them. And if you guys have any questions, now is the chance for Q&A to ask Mr. Khan.
Amazing. Yes, questions, please. Do I get to call on them, or do you want to call on them? I think it's more democratic if you call on them.
All right. I suppose let's start with Ehsan. Would you like?
Hi, hello. It was absolutely amazing hearing what you said. I heard your weekly review that you do every week on YouTube last night, and I think my question would be a little bit bigger than everybody's apologies from beforehand. I'm sure you know about the situation currently happening in Bangladesh, and it relates to that. Just to give you some context, even 2 weeks ago, although the problem was about quota, right now today there was more than 100,000 people in front of the National Liberation Museum, and they're all wanting the Prime Minister to step down. And my father is personally a journalist. He's the deputy editor of one of the biggest newspapers in the country. And the way you spoke about in states like ours, how journalists always, they don't fear criticism. They fear being picked up, being abducted, and not coming back to their family every night during situations like this. I feel like I personally live in a family where I see the reality of it every night, and that's why I respect journalists everywhere in the world, and that's why I'm interested in stuff like this. So
Thank you.
Two questions from my end. The first question is, as an experienced journalist who is specialized in South Asian history, and you belong from there, I have never seen Bangladesh being in a situation like this in my lifetime, and even since my country's independence from Pakistan in 1971, this has never happened. As a journalist, what do you think the future holds for Bangladesh currently based on the situation on the ground? Considering the fact that there are growing rumors that the Indian intelligence agency RAW is on the ground operating with government forces to kill its own people so that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina can stay in power. And I'm sorry if I get emotional, this is very hard for me because I'm going back on the 8th in Dhaka, and the first thing I'm going to do when I land from my flight is going to my friends, going to the movement. Because democracy matters, and if my friends give their blood, I'm going to join them because I'm sorry, but like my roommate Matt, they see me like every night. I call my dad and I'm like, "Are you guys doing fine? Like, what's the situation?" So now that's my number one question. What do you think the future is based on the current context of Bangladesh? What do you think Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina might do, and what might happen? And my number two question is, being a journalist, and how you said that you can't return home back to your girls, and journalists in at least our part of the world or the global south face such realities. How do you take all that in? What do you do? Because I hear my father talking about this all the time, but how do you live with the reality knowing that you live in a reality where there is no chance that you might talk to your family tomorrow, what gives you that courage, and how do you keep moving on from that point? Yeah, thank you very much.
That's an interesting question. Well, firstly, for context, this young man's country and my country used to be the same country till they weren't. And there was a terrible civil war in 1970-71. And my country's military and political leadership did terrible things to his, at that point ours, but not really, but now effectively his country's leadership and people. It's a very difficult thing to, as a Pakistani, to talk to a Bangladeshi for all sorts of reasons. The genocide, which some academics call it, in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, is something which has not been widely acknowledged by the best, even the best intellectuals, advocates, activists in Pakistan. It's sort of a dirty little secret where hundreds of thousands of people were killed, but it's something you don't talk about. So this is what you're about to witness is a very, very rare exchange. I think there are parallels to what is happening in Bangla and in Pak. I think the Indians, as you have mentioned, and there are reports about Indian intelligence playing a pivotal role in suppressing the protests there. For context, some of Bangladesh's biggest protests in years, if not decades, are happening right now. There's a huge, huge crackdown. The internet has been shut for several days. Several people have been killed by state security forces, and the regime which runs it, I wouldn't even call it a government at this point, the regime which runs it with an iron hand, interestingly run by a woman. Always expect way better from women because I was raised by one. But the woman who runs it with an iron hand and is not in the mood to compromise. The Bangladeshis are trying to get organized. They're doing all sorts of interesting things. And this is where it becomes a matter of global affairs. For example, they have just started a mass movement to stop remittances, which are in the billions per year. I think almost 2 billion per month. It's a lot of money for a poor country. It's around 25 big ones, which go to Bangladesh. So people are getting organized. So basically what's happening is your next Uber delivery guy, who could or could not be a Bengali, if you ask him next time whether he's going to be sending money back to his country, he might say no, because it's becoming a political issue. They're trying to make this country go broke. But disappointing in all of this is the Indians. Now, we expect better from India. I know it's coming, it's rich coming from a Pakistani, but bear with me. This is the world's fastest growing economy. This is now the world's 5th largest economy. This is the largest democracy in the world. The rest of us in South Asia look up to India, even though some of us clearly are at war with India, like the Pakistanis are. But I look up to India personally for its democratic ideals, for its civilian structures. It's the only country in the region which has continuously supported democracy. But India is backtracking. India is backsliding, and it can be easily called just an electoral democracy, not a liberal democracy. There's a difference. Electoral democracies just have elections and people move on. Liberal democracies care for people. Democracy does not equal to just elections. But also other things matter. The fact that the Indians can influence the affairs of Bangladesh, they're a smaller country, they're right next door, they have great ties. The fact that they're not doing that is disturbing. The fact that there's an internet outage is disturbing. The fact that you're ready to go back and join the movement is inspiring, but I urge you to be careful. I do think there are parallels for Pakistan here, the lessons to be learned. Bangladesh is ethnically more homogenous. That's why the protests are better organized. The Pakistanis have too many divisions in themselves. I don't want to bore the rest of our friends with the nitty-gritty of South Asian ethnicity and politics, but the larger lesson here is very simple. Especially keeping it right here in the United States. The Bangladeshis had a very, very faulty election earlier this year. This is not just happening in a vacuum. The same woman I mentioned, Sheikh Hasina, who's been ruling that country for several years now, refused to relinquish and have free elections. What did this country do? What did the United States do? Nothing. Because Bangladesh is also, very importantly, the fastest growing economy, one of the fastest growing economies in that region, and has the highest GDP per capita of that region. It's an important trade partner. So trade was placed before democratic ideals. And there's so many instances of this happening. So when you go to your programs, always remember there's going to be a trade-off. Equality, liberalism, democracy versus trade, which basically, I'm sorry to say, means money. So, yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. What makes me saddest still is that the Indians who can have the right sort of influence are not executing their right sort of influence in that region. Next question.
Yes. Next question. Ali.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed. I'm actually from Karachi, and I also go to the Karachi Grammar School.
Awesome. What house were you in?
Street Hill.
That's too bad.
Napier Heights?
Do I look like a Napier? Come on.
Right.
Yeah, hell yes. Okay.
I've been losing since the last 3 years.
Oh, come on. Okay, moving on.
I was African American. I'm not an editor, but I'm an African American. And as you spoke, Bashir Sharif and Imran Ras Khan, that's pretty sad. And then I was in the generation when we seen Imran Khan, like what happened to him.
Awesome.
So that really motivated me to go back, and now my goal is to become the Prime Minister of Pakistan in the long term. My question to you was that how many years has it been to you since you visited Pakistan, and do you plan to go back? Thank you.
There's a lot of personal questions here. There's a personal question from our young friend over here as well. Okay, let me be very clear. Firstly, I don't like talking about myself because it's sort of irrelevant. I'm forced to because of what's happening to me. So it just becomes, I hate becoming the story. But I can't not go back to Pakistan. Firstly, it's my country. My forefathers helped make that country. I belong to a family which has served Pakistan in different capacities for the last, and India for that matter, when we were united, for over the last 100 years. So it's my country, and they can't keep me out of it. They're trying. They've got internet firewalls targeting my show. They're calling my friends, threatening them. They tried to recently abduct my brother-in-law, who had to go underground. As I've said earlier, they've blocked my passport. They're trying me in an anti-terrorism court for sedition and treason and just being, I don't know, generally good looking or anything they can throw at me. I don't know, man. But the only thing is, I'm not taking any of this about myself seriously because there's larger fish to fry here. And that makes this a pan-South Asian story. There's, right now, as we speak, in no particular order, let me tell you what's happening in some of these countries. There's thousands of people on the streets of Gwadar right now at this very moment protesting. Gwadar is a city in Balochistan, my home province. They're protesting abductions. Families have lost boys and young men who were picked up 5-10 years ago, gone in the thousands. There's protests in Bangladesh which are happening right now. There's Shia-Sunni riots happening near the Afghan border in Parachinar. Right? And of course, let's not even go further west into Afghanistan. Let's not even bore you with those details. This is a very, very, very difficult region. Issue is, why aren't they letting us tell these stories? Why? Why don't you let someone report? Because something is at stake here. The status quo is at stake. And ultimately, this can't be about me. This has to be about the story. And when you don't let them do their job, then Pakistan has a lot to learn from Bangladesh, where then people really take to the streets, which has started happening now. Now, Pakistan won't let India come in and help its Indian intelligence do what it does, but I fear that this country, through its tacit support for the Pakistani regime, provides them the legitimacy which they don't deserve at this point. And in all of this, the good news is, let's not just bore everybody with details, in all of this, the good news is that the diaspora here is getting organized. The Bangladeshis are getting organized and not sending money back, for example, to cripple that regime. The Pakistanis are getting organized and affecting change in Congress. There was a huge resolution passed by a huge vote just last month. So this community right here, this becomes all of a sudden, it becomes much more important to be a Pakistani American or a Bangladeshi American. And that's what gives me hope. So I think I can do more sitting right here. If I go back, it's pretty clear what'll happen. I'll be arrested at the airport. I'll probably be taken somewhere dark and dingy, and they'll do what they need to do. And maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. I'm still gonna go back. I just don't know when.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, miss. Go ahead. I think we should balance it out gender-wise, if that's all right, if I can assume that.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to know, for those one who can, return to the homeland, because that's kind of situation, what do you think, that people can do even if they cannot return to their lands?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so that people who cannot return to the homeland, what they can do even if they cannot return, doing something even from the distance.
What a great question. What a great question. You were saying something, Alina?
No, it was good.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the question is worth repeating for the sake of everyone. So what can people who can't go back to their homeland, what can they do? Wow. I wake up every morning thinking of that question. And it's difficult to answer. People are getting organized in different ways in different communities. I just mentioned the South Asian diaspora, which I happen to be a part of, so naturally I know the most about it. We seem to be doing really well. To tell you, for example, the Pakistani diaspora story. We're the fifth richest diaspora population in this country. The Indians come first. The Taiwanese come second. The Chinese come third. The Japanese come fourth. And we come fifth. Not bad. But in terms of just per capita household income. But we're inherently disorganized because we haven't really ever, till this moment, participated in mainstream US politics. We don't send enough of our children to law school. We don't send enough of our children to Capitol Hill or public policy institutions. Chances are that the next Pakistani American you meet is either an engineer or a doctor or a 7-Eleven owner or a taxi driver. Either very rich or very poor. Chances are that the next Pakistani undergrad you will meet is probably going to B-school, not law school, or they're pre-med and not doing poli-sci. And I think this has left, for example, just from my own experience, this has left our community in a lurch because we haven't really participated in what you are here to do. And that leaves a generational gap. Alina and I are working on an initiative along with other students at Yale to bridge that gap. I can't in any way tell you that this country in Africa or this country in Latin America, the diaspora here where people can't go back or are disconnected, how can they get organized? But I can tell you that certain instances, there are certain great success stories. For example, this is where we must talk about the Indian diaspora, which has done really well, remarkably well. There's an outsized number of Indians in the US Congress right now. There's an outsized number of Indians vis-a-vis the diaspora in public affairs, working on Capitol Hill, working in American media. they're from the same region I am, but they seem to be doing something better. But on an individual level, all of this becomes a safety issue as well. The FBI is investigating my case as a case of transnational repression. They're aware of what's going on and the threats to me, and they're being helpful. But the diaspora is under fire. Again, the Indians right now are having a bit of a spat with both the US and the Canadian government. They're trying to get, in fact, according to the Canadians, they have gotten people killed. In Canada, they've gotten one activist killed. They try to get another activist killed right here in New York City. There's a man who's been extradited. This is next level, like Jason Bourne stuff. It's coming, it's happening, it's here. Transnational repression is coming for the diaspora. So these are difficult choices to make, but getting organized and playing the public policy game, either at local politics or inside the Beltway, investing in trying to understand the US legislative system, the US legal system, and then of course using that to propel your own case. This is the most powerful country in the world. This is also still, to some extent, one of the most free countries in the world. And the diaspora should take advantage of that. Huge advantage of that. I can get out of my apartment, hop on a train, come to Yale and talk like this. This doesn't happen in other countries. It's not that easy. So I think the diaspora should really, for those of us who are stuck here, should really take advantage of the civil liberties of these great United States. But there will be a cost, and there are challenges. And I hope every diaspora or every individual can overcome them. It's a huge question.
I think we have 5 minutes left, if I'm correct. And
There's a
this
question
will
in the-
probably be our last question for tonight's session. Let's see.
And take one in the back.
Yes. Yes.
So I just wanted to say thank you for the moving speech and answers. I'm currently working on writing for a public policy think tank, and so
Which one? Which one?
It's called the Yankee Institute. It's within Connecticut. So I wanted just to get some insight on your writing process. So here's my question. So obviously the art of journalism is a balance between facts and the opinions of the personal writer. So I was wondering how you balance those two things into creating your masterpieces. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great question. My God, this is what you leave me with on Saturday night? Listen, think tanks, firstly, you need to understand what you're doing and where you're working, right? Think tanks are interesting because think tanks, and this gets me really excited because I love think tanks and I hate think tanks. And I want to make a think tank, but I want to blow the rest of them up too, right? Because think tanks do what universities do, what consultancies do, and what the media does. And they do it together at the same time. For example, think tanks will put out policy papers, recommendations, draft proposals, whatever, right? This is what Yale does. The Global Affairs School will do the same thing. They'd conduct in-depth research. Then they will do, on the other hand, what people like me do, what media does, which is publish this and air it and talk about it and have a webinar or a seminar or a conference and expand on that. And very importantly, they do what McKinsey does, they do what consultancies do. They get called in, the best of us get called into Washington, and then we're told, we're asked by people in government or other clients about what we think should happen. So think tanks are the most versatile, most fertile, and for those of you who are considering careers, make sure that you don't have to work at a think tank, but make sure you fly by one in your future years. Because it's a really versatile, fertile ground to do a bunch of things. You can get to be a journalist at a think tank. You can get to be a geek at a think tank. You can get to be a policy analyst at a think tank. You can get to be a wonk. You can get to be a politician. I don't know what your proposal is on. I don't know what your research is on. But my only advice for the writing process is, and this is general advice, not just for think tank writing, but just general advice. Read the people, the publications which and who you want to read like. You want to talk about scary people living in New England? Read Stephen King. Right? You want to sound like and read like a think tanker? Then read a lot of think tank reports. You gotta absorb it. Emulation will help. The process is very the same you'll get here at university. You've got your sourcing, you've got different types of methodology, but I'm not aware of what exactly your, what is your topic on?
Right now we're working on like an article about ARPA, which is the COVID-19 stimulus bill, but it's very general and I'm going into more of the economical aspect.
What's your challenge?
My challenge is my voice. I struggle to embody my opinion with the facts, and that's why I was asking the question about how you kind of balance those two aspects.
I don't know if you're allowed to have an opinion at the stage you're at. I hate saying this, but life is in TikTok, and you're verging on academic writing. So you don't get to have an opinion just yet. You do get to analyze. That's about as opinionated as you can get. And a good analysis covers the left, right, and center bases of whatever the subject is. But from what I understand, that is not a world of opinion. But I would say, again, analysis should be very, very well rooted in a bunch of, don't ever approach writing something with like, this is all I'm going to say, especially when it comes to analytical work. There's always, firstly, but there's more than one side, there's several sides. But I would just suggest, very humbly, that you read more reports. Go get your supervisor to recommend his or her favorite or their favorite topics. But I wouldn't opine at this stage. Think tanks are not for opinion. Think tanks are for analyses. That's why they exist. That's what I recommend. I don't know if I'm sorry, I didn't come up with the magic solution. Okay, we clearly can't end on that note. So, but thank you though, thank you.
Everyone can warm up.